My name is Renee Aldrich. I am a lifelong resident of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was born in the Lower Hill in an area called Soho that is now called Uptown for obvious reasons. I grew up there. My grandmother had a home on Tustin Street, 2127 Tustin, and my grandmother was a tremendous entrepreneur at a time when there was no advocacy for Black women to become entrepreneurs. There were no services to help them learn how to write a business plan, et cetera, et cetera. She was just gifted, and she and her sisters started a business. And many years ago, I moved away from home, and I came home to relocate my children, and I was downtown in the Strip District, and there I saw a vendor. This vendor was selling black and white prints taken by the late Teenie Harris. On top of his pile of photos was a picture of my grandmother, and I was appalled. He was selling pictures of my grandmother. And I would go on to learn later that this man had confiscated and scammed Teenie Harris out of 2,500 of his negatives, because in his later years, Teenie Harris kind of got broke. He had only worked for the Courier all these years, and he got broke, and this gentleman scammed him, took these photographs, and was selling them. There was a law firm in the city hired by Teenie Harris's family to go after the negatives. And they did it pro bono, this law firm, and they were successful. They were able to get all those photos that this man had taken. And just a bit about Teenie Harris, he was a photographer for the New Pittsburgh Courier. He was called One Shot because he couldn't afford a whole lot of bulbs. And at that time, it was the camera with the big flash. And he had to get it right the first time. And overall, that's what he did. And he was called One Shot Harris. And he took hundreds of thousands of photographs of this Black community across Pittsburgh, of entertainers, of sports figures, of political figures. He told the African-American story through his photos. So, after the negatives were confiscated from that gentleman that scammed him, the family then turned them over to Carnegie Museum for them to archive. And that they did. And they there was an installation, Teenie Harris on display. And it was stayed at the museum, and a bit of it is still there now. And you could go there and you could look at all the pictures, and people were, at this time, the city was excited about Teenie Harris. People took him as a hero, and everybody wanted to talk about that they were in their photos or in his photos, et cetera, et cetera. But at any rate, the museum did the installation, and you could go there anytime to see it as long as it was up. So, one afternoon, I left work, needing a break from the office. At the time, I worked in Oakland, and the Carnegie Museum is in Oakland. I left work on my lunch hour. I needed a break. I needed to get away from there. And I thought, this is a good time for me to go to see the Teenie Harris display. And I walked down there and I went in the room, and it was just pictures everywhere. While I was in there, I noticed that beside each picture, there was some cards where they would ask you to please, if you're here and you see these pictures, please, and you know who they are, please identify them. And after a while of walking through and looking at the pictures and walking through, there I came upon my grandmother's photo. with her large customer sitting on a stool, and she was behind the counter. And sure enough, there were other photos. There was a photo of the B&M restaurant, which was the restaurant she started with her sister. Then there was her own restaurant, Ma Pitt's Restaurant. And I immediately reflected back to the hours I spent in that restaurant. The hours I spent playing with pop bottle tops, making designs with them on the table. The hours I would watch her sitting in the middle of the restaurant in a chair near the cash register, entertaining businessmen, salesmen, coming to see her, spending hours with her. They really believed that they knew more about business than she did. And all too often they found out they did not. She would often get a lot of heat because she would hire people if they had an alcohol problem, even if they had a drug problem. If the women were, let's just say, had unsavory nightlife, she hired them. And she would say, when she took the heat, why are you hiring him? He's just gonna buy whiskey with the money, or they're just gonna get drugs, or aren't you afraid they're gonna steal from you? She said, no, because I'm gonna pay them what they're worth. I'm gonna pay them for the job I asked them to do. When I saw her picture, I got the card and I filled out the card. This is Erin Godfrey. She is my grandmother. She owned a restaurant on Wiley and Townsend. It was called Ma Pitt's Restaurant. And I must have given them my address. About 1 year later, easily a year, as the story says, I was up in my room rifling through papers, trying to bring some order to that room. And I came upon an 8x10 white envelope. And I was intrigued. Oh, and of course the return address said Teenie Harris Archives. So I was really intrigued because at this point, I barely even remembered going to the museum. I opened the envelope and there fell out the gems, I call them, because that's what they were. Number one, it was a letter from the director of the archives, literally apologizing to me for the delay in getting back to me because the gentleman who was assigned to that task had changed jobs. So that kind of got shifted to the side. The letter. Then there was some Courier articles. The one Courier article was the banner page of the New Pittsburgh Courier of my grandmother's funeral. It said, "Heal woman, heal businesswoman, laid to rest. She fed thousands." And there was the picture of her casket coming out of Wesley Center Church, which was her church. And there in front of it was my mother crying and my father holding her. The other article was a feature article dated 1953 that clearly someone wrote about my grandmother. Now, what really moved me about that, because at that time, I was a freelance writer for the New Pittsburgh Courier. And the feature article that was shown in the envelope was the very type of writing that I then was doing. I did features on business owners, sometimes athletes, if I could get an audience with them if they came to town, anything in the Hill District. That was the beat that I had as a freelance writer. So I saw that article, I saw the one about my grandmother, the funeral, and all the memories came rushing back, all of them, about her and the time I spent with her and how and the wisdom she gave to all of us. And that it was information about my grandmother and who she was and how her family came to Pittsburgh and how she had this restaurant business and what great cooks they were. And here I found this envelope in my bedroom at a time that I was in a very strange place for myself. I wasn't feeling very, I don't know, successful, capable, whatever. But I know I was in a dark, I won't say dark, but a gray place. When I found this envelope, I found the articles and I read them and I decided this must be a message from her. Somehow, if you believe in those things, helping me to understand where I come from. Her family took a chance leaving Meriwether, Georgia, to find a respite in Pittsburgh. And she brought others up here as well. And I wrote this in the article that she should have been one of the new Pittsburgh Courier's 50 Women of Excellence. That's how I started. If they had a 50 Women of Excellence back then, she would have been one of them. And here are the reasons why.